Time's ticking.
Windows 10 end of life's fast approaching.
What are we going to do about it?
Let's find out.
The end of life date is officially October the 14th, 2025, and that's on version 22H2 will be the last one. So we hear the word end of life being knocked around quite a bit with IT, but what does that actually mean for a user?
For a user, probably not so much. For someone who has to look after and manage these devices, quite a bit. So realistically, you're talking about certainly the end of any sort of feature updates. And I think, to be honest, that's the last feature update for Windows. Major feature update for Windows 10 was maybe a year or two ago. But really, it's kind of security updates won't be available as is, and kind of patches. So I think it's kind of security updates and patching, which is the main ones, and then as well as that support. So you can't really contact Microsoft for any sort of assistance with an issue around Windows 10.
And I guess as well, it's vendors, third-party vendors, isn't it? We work a lot of application vendors here, and they might get to the stage of if they're probably going to stop developing for Windows 10 their applications. So it's really, you don't want to get to the stage of you're out of support with Microsoft, but you think, yeah, operating system's working okay, but then you speak to third parties, you've got problems with applications, they won't support you, and then you're kind of stuck then and to try and get that done. Yeah,
you could take a chance, and stuff might work, but at the end of the day, if you that vendor or third party is saying, well, might work, but it's not supported by yours on this platform, it does leave you in a difficult position and sort of exposes you to difficulties if you do ever actually run into a problem.
So for the client, we've heard stories in the past of people like NASA that were still running Windows 98 and they had extended support from Microsoft. So if there is a client that are running Windows 10 and they can't move from it for an application reason, a business reason, and they do want to go end of life, do they have an option to continue? Is there any paid support options they can use?
So there's extended support, which Microsoft will be kind of making available. And as I think they did this with Windows 7 and 8, could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure they did. But it's basically an annual fee that you'll pay Microsoft, and what that will give you is sort of extended support, as the name suggests. So you'll continue to receive security updates and patches, and effectively still be on a supported operating system. I think looking at numbers, it's like $60 a month.
Yeah, I think I've got
$60 a year, and then for the first year, and then going into the next year after that, it will double.
Yeah.
So some organizations might be able to swallow that for the first year, but realistically after that, it's going to become a harder sell once that price doubles.
Yeah, I really see that as maybe like a manufacturing company that has got some custom software that's only written for Windows 10. They've invested thousands on it, and it can't be moved for any reason. Mm-hmm. But obviously it needs to be kept secure. So I think there's a small case to use it, but I think for the majority of clients out there, I think they should be looking at moving away from it, moving to Windows 11, staying in support.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning as well, if you're on Azure Virtual Desktop or Windows 365 PC, you'll get that extended support included. So if you're on those platforms, you sort of don't necessarily need to worry about upgrading just yet, although it might be prudent to do it now rather than wait until it becomes absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But I mean, you mentioned about those cases where a company might want to take out the extended support and carry on working on the older operating systems. I mean, remember when there was that cyber attack on the NHS, and it kind of became apparent that they were using Windows XP for a lot of things. And I know, I think the Navy kind of have a lot of systems that are based on older operating systems as well. I don't know if these are technically supported or if it's just a case of, look, there's nothing else we can do. We're just going to have to run it on these platforms and then protect it and sort of ring fence it as best we can.
Probably paying Microsoft a fat wedge of cash, aren't they, for a few people to sit there writing secure updates still for them?
Yeah, and this is it. Like the date at the moment is October 2025, but is that set in stone? I mean, I seem to remember Windows 10 end of life being originally slated for April 2025. That got moved, kind of pushed back 6 months to where we are now, the situation with October. But like all the kind of news around that sort of disappeared, and it's hard to actually find any documentation or news releases from Microsoft around it. Almost like they wanted to kind of cover up a little bit the fact that they've had to push it back.
Yeah.
So, if I were a betting man, I think there's a good chance that October 2025 maybe gets pushed back again. And I think what will drive that will be essentially one of the big boys, some really high up Fortune 100, Fortune 10 company in America, just saying, look, we're not going to pay for extended support here. You're gonna extend support for us for free, or you just need to push this date back.
Yeah. I think it's a tough one, isn't it, for especially clients we work with. I don't think they can kind of work towards that. I think the risk factor, I think the time it'll take for some people as well. So in terms of working with vendors, testing applications, looking at if they need additional hardware. So I think really people do need to plan to be moving off by October. And some businesses probably been planning for this a long time. Some, might be on the journey and they completed it already. But yeah, I think for us, I think it's a must-have to move off Windows 10.
Yeah, and I think as well as the patching, as I think we said, you're not going to get the new features that come with Windows 11, and there are kind of one or two at the moment, things like Copilot. And I think as sort of AI takes off more and more, that's going to become a more useful feature, which would obviously be lacking, and I'm sure Microsoft will add more as Windows 11 continues to go through its life cycle.
Yeah. So we've got a client that we spoke about before. They can't upgrade. They need to stay in end of life support for it. So kind of what security things can we do? Obviously, we've spoken in the past things about kind of ring fencing machines. So that'd be, we could segregate them off our network, we can put them in kind of a legacy network, firewall, etc. Do you think that's a feasible solution for people to keep it? Or do they need to say that much? Do they need to be that cautious of it?
It's certainly not desirable, is it? And if you're kind of having to manage those sort of platforms and environments, it become a bit of a pain. I think though, with the proper amount of diligence and caution applied, you can protect these sort of systems that aren't receiving any more security patches. So, the type of thing they're patching against are vulnerabilities from sort of external sources and attackers.
Yeah.
Well, if you're aware of these vulnerabilities and mitigate against them by putting your machines in a completely kind of air-gapped environment. So I don't know, maybe manufacturing as an example, if you have a machine that's hooked up to some sort of machinery and it has to run an older operating system, we can make sure it's not on the internet. And straight away you've sort of removed a very big attack vector. Obviously there's a sort of physical security, but then you just make sure that the machine is sort of password protected to in a way that will stop any sort of in-person attack. And I think that's, like, for the most part, really quite sound in terms of security.
Yeah, again, a lot of those machines don't even have access to the internet, do they? When they're running plant machinery and things like that, it's just kind of a segregated VLAN almost on the network, isn't it?
And for machines that maybe do need internet access to perform sort of various tasks, you can kind of look at zero trust and really only allow it access to the things it definitely needs. And I think that does provide a level of security. But there will always be vulnerabilities in different ways that machines can be exploited. So no matter how well you protect something, I think there is always a risk.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just how...
Just trying to mitigate that, isn't it, as best you can?
Yeah, and how comfortable you are with the level of risk that's kind of been introduced. And not being up to date with patches is just one sort of facet or element to that.
Kind of the big one, I guess it's the one we work on most at the moment, is Azure Virtual Desktop. So Azure Virtual Desktop, I think it was 2019, I forget my stats. Yeah, 2019 was the first release of it. So this is a build of Windows 10 that allows multiple users to log onto a single desktop. And it's really taken over kind of, I say, post-COVID, more people working remotely, people migrating to Azure, moving away from Citrix. We've seen it grow massively now as a product. So questions are, can I upgrade it? How simple is the upgrade? And what's the process?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one, really, because I suppose in the past when you're talking about remote desktops, sort of what it is really, isn't it? A lot of that would have been on server operating system. In terms of an actual process and what you're doing, it's kind of the same. In the same way you in an enterprise environment, you wouldn't ideally perform an in-place upgrade of Windows Server for something like AVD. You wouldn't necessarily want to do an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 to 11. And
I think Microsoft's official stance is it's actually unsupported.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an in-place upgrade.
And yeah, you can sort of see why. I think if you're ever going to invest a lot of time and effort into transition from one system to another, you may as well make it as clean as possible. Because I mean, you think about it, you if you're using the Windows 10 image in AVD, chances are that's kind of over time accumulated all sorts of funky artifacts that you wouldn't necessarily want to just add Windows 11 on top of and carry on with. It's a really good opportunity to sort of clear the decks, start afresh with something, and maybe get rid of some of the legacy configuration and niggles that have been embedded into your image.
Yeah, I've been reading kind of the darkness of the internet of people who have attempted this. So obviously to move from AVD to Windows 10 to Windows 11, from technically the build side, it's relatively straightforward, but the time comes in installing apps, rewriting group policies, sorting out profiles, building all that, UAT testing. So that actually takes a long time. So we've seen some businesses now that have just thought, we've seen it, you can do an in-place upgrade unsupportedly. There's documentation how to do it out there. All the people that I've seen comment saying they've done it so far, they've had problems with applications hanging, they've had logon issues, they've had problems with FSLogix crashing. So I think when, Bob in IT reads it, does an upgrade, tests it himself, thinks that's great, and then rolls it out to 500 people, and I think then that's put you in a situation where you've got 500 staff, people who are inundating you with issues, host crashing. I think the risk to the business, I think it's too big to even attempt to do it.
Yeah, you can see why people are tempted though. Like, the thought of having to reinstall all your applications, dig out all those
the documentation they did from the last build, which you can follow.
Oh, I needed to tweak this registry key or register this DLL manually because of some old antiquated application. And as soon as you start to kind of realize the scope of what you might have to do, like taking shortcuts sometimes can be a bit tempting. But in my experience, it's never worth the time you save, because you end up just spending way more later on down the line trying to fix problems that it causes. Yeah,
so I think, like I say, to do the upgrade, we're looking at a fresh build, UAT testing, new group policies, I'd say. Look at modernising them, look at the changes that have gone, kind of the Microsoft baseline. But really, there is going to be a small cost, I guess, to the business while they're doing this. So we've discussed things like FSLogix, that's profile containers we use in AVD. Obviously, the profile technology's changed a little bit in Windows 11. I think you don't want to be carrying the bloat over from 10 to 11 either. We've seen people have got things stuck in the profiles. So I think you've got to start from fresh. But obviously, that means new profile shares. So for a short time, I guess there's going to be a crossover there, isn't there? Of you can have two sets of profiles while you're doing the transition. You might have some additional compute cost while you're doing UAT and transitioning people across.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily double up, but you're going to certainly increase your spend for a period. And I think there's almost a skill to sort of balancing that and trying to run as lean as possible and really kind of, right, okay, we move this certain number of users over. Let's take away from the old pool and try and just keep that balance as fine as you can to reduce the spend. Yeah,
I think it's really tweaking, isn't it? Things like scaling plan as well could come in handy there.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of profiles. I think I said before, it's, this is a good opportunity to kind of clear things out and really start fresh. And in the long run, I think that will benefit users for kind of a faster, more responsive environment. However, in the short term, it can be a little bit
pain.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult for them because you think about a new profile. It shouldn't be too bad, really, but there are some things like quick parts in Word. You've got to kind of grab those files out and pull them across.
Yeah.
There's a lot you can do with sort of centralized management, and I suppose when I say that, I mean group policy.
Yeah.
To kind of automate a lot of that configuration and look and feel, so that really destroying somebody's profile and recreating it for them shouldn't actually make that much difference.
Yeah.
But there will be occasions where the user might just have to move something from where it is by default to what they're used to and just kind of perform those little tweaks. But I mean, I think for the overall gain that you're going to make, it's worth that little bit of effort. And part of it as well is kind of speaking to your users and not necessarily educating them, but at least preparing them for what's about to come, and getting them on board and sort of not necessarily evangelizing, but
getting buy-in, isn't it, off them?
Getting them excited about we're doing this. It's going to be slight bit of inconvenience in the short term, but long term we're going to have all these sort of gains. We're going to have improved performance. Things are going to be less bogged down with kind of old things, and it's just selling it in a certain way, I suppose.
So actually, the dream is the scenarios that I've spoke to people about in the past is, what is your Windows image? It's just a base for all your applications, isn't it? So Microsoft got technology now, so you could even use Intune on your AVD session host. So you could have all your applications in Intune. Yeah, we just put up a new image, push all the apps to it. It's kind of all done and dusted. So we're not spending hours reinstalling apps, looking at old scripts. It's kind of all built into Intune. We've got things like Appx, MSIX packages. So really that means as a new build comes out into the market, we can just be like, we want this latest version, build a new host, put it in, all the configs pushed to it straight away. So we're not going through the time and effort to get it working. The caveat, the MSIX and Appx, I think it works great for simple applications. I think as soon as you start getting complex applications in there, I think it kind of really, really struggles as a product. Mm-hmm. I'd say Intune's capable of it, but then you've got problems with delayed applications being delayed, being pushed out and things like that. So I guess, is it looking at third-party tools as well that could push out applications?
Yeah, there's always that one application that just ruins all your plans, isn't there? You think you can sort of deliver something in a really modern, sleek way, and then along comes that one app that no one likes that just is so old and rubbish, but you have to have, and it just kind of, and you have to compromise the way you're doing everything just to accommodate for it.
Yeah,
I guess it's like the sort of that presentation of applications isn't necessarily anything new. I mean, I guess it goes back to what was the app virtualization that Microsoft did a long time ago? Is it AppV?
Yeah,
and there was something else as well. I forget, but it was a sort of similar concept. And I know Citrix had something along the same lines where you're sort of virtualizing applications and layering them on top of your operating system with the idea of you don't actually install the applications onto your OS image. It's sort of separate, kind of helps with troubleshooting and segregation, so that if you do have that kind of one badly behaving application, it's kind of containerized, so to speak, and kept separate from everything else. And I guess that means that you can configure it in a slightly different way without compromising everything else. But I don't know, it's never for me seemed to have been something that's been massively implemented. I think from what I've seen, it kind of, if it was straightforward and easy to implement, then I think a lot more people would be doing it, and it would be quite beneficial. But for whatever reason, it just never seems to kind of work in the way that a lot of people want it to.
Yeah, I think it comes probably to time and investment. I think to actually sit there and get all your applications, and you're probably going to triple the time of the project to get everything working, aren't you? I think a lot of time people just aren't fortunate to kind of have that, and then you're working with vendors and they might be like, we don't support it, we can't support you. So I think people have probably shied away from it. But I think for some simple applications, I think it's probably one to consider.
Yeah.
It's like things like PDQ, things like, there is app packaging tools out there which can do it.
And then you sort of get into the realm of like presenting virtualized applications running in the cloud to your PC. Don't call them PCs anymore, devices.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting kind of way to look at things and maybe organize things. But again, it's like, it's down to your apps. If you, because a lot of companies will kind of be using SaaS-based products. And they may even be fortunate enough to not have any applications that need to be installed or run anywhere, and in which case, like, this whole thing becomes way easier.
Yeah, just work on your laptop, maybe a VPN back if you need anything, but yeah, super simple, Intune upgrades done.
And everything's just a web app that you can really run from anywhere and access on any device.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
I think my top tip is documentation. I think if anyone's embarking on this journey, they just need to ensure everything's documented so when it kind of makes any future upgrades nice and easy. So I think that wraps up kind of the Windows 11 side of kind of our journey, where we see people going. There's predictions out there, which I've seen already, about Windows 12 being released, which seems, I say, crazy almost in terms of people are being pushed to move to Windows 11. It doesn't feel like it's like Windows 11's been out long enough really for Windows 12 to be out there. I think the dates are late 2025, early 2026.
For Windows 12. Windows 12. I've heard similar. And you do wonder, like, will some people not wanting to just go to Windows 11, will they hang on to Windows 10 for maybe another year?
This would be like the 8.1, people skipping it and just...
just go straight to 12 from 10, maybe. It's funny though, like, you never know what Microsoft's going to do. There was a lot of talk about Windows 10 being the last Windows.
Yeah, just going to be upgraded forever.
And that never really kind of materialized. Perhaps into the future, it will turn more into a kind of, not a version releases, but just incremental sort of changes and upgrades to one operating system that just persists.
But I think that date of Windows 12 being that close in 2025, I think it'll probably put doubt in people's heads to think, oh, should we just hold out a bit longer? But I think it's going to push them closer and closer. And like me personally, I'd probably never push out the first release of an operating system to something like AVD. I think, it's until it's properly tested. I don't think it's something that we would look at. I guess to summarise our final thoughts on this, I think people do need to be looking at moving away. I don't think it's a viable option to be sticking on Windows 10.
I think from what we've said, it seems apparent to me that people should really start, if they haven't already, to think about making that upgrade. I know kind of from previous experience in other places I've worked, I'm thinking about that time that Windows 2 Server 2008 R2 was kind of becoming end of life, and there were so many machines running on that.
Yeah.
And people just put it off, and it got to a point where we had so many customers running on it, and all of a sudden we had to just do all these upgrades.
I think it's sometimes difficult almost for a client, because obviously it takes time to upgrade, doesn't it? And to the client, application A works on 2008, it worked on 2012, doesn't it? So it's kind of seeing the benefit of moving operating systems. So I think people just really need to budget, I think, for the change. And obviously be planning. This information's been put out there since last year. It was with this date. So I think people need to have planned correctly for it and not be running around like headless chickens come October thinking we've got 2 weeks, we need to get this all upgraded.
Yeah, and although it's probably not as bad as a server operating system in that you're not kind of running databases or actual application workloads, more just kind of client stuff, the same principle applies. If you just put it off, it's only going to become more difficult. If you've not started to go down that upgrade path, you really need to do it now. It's just going to get worse if you don't.
Yeah, I think compared to a server operating system, obviously that's kind of the techs in the back end doing all that. The end users don't need to really see how the background looks in it. But I think when you get down to a customer-facing operating system, we've all been there with customizations that need to have. The start menu needs to look like this. The font needs to look like this. That is the stuff, that can take time. Things have changed as well between how things are done, group policies, configuration. So it's probably going to take you more time than you actually think it's going to take you as well to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily the technical side of doing it. it's kind of working with the business. If the business is too busy, you need kind of key stakeholders engaged at the time. You need super users to be on testing it, kind of, I guess, singing its praise almost, that, you know, it is a good thing that the work's happening, and yeah, kind of driving that forward in the business.
Yeah, pulling those resistant, tricky users along with them.